Hey there everyone, it's Nina. Thanks for joining me today for a new video. I thought I would share a project with you that is another edge-to-edge shaker card. I love making these and I wanted to use some of the daffodil themed products from Simon Says Stamp. They actually came out not that long ago from one of their newer releases, and there are actually two sets that I designed for that release. One of which is the Spring Stems stamp set, and then the other is the Daffodil Field Cling. So I'm going to start first by using the cling. I have it inside of my Misty tool here, and I'm going to stamp this pattern onto some white cardstock. I've lined up my cardstock inside of my Misty tool with a piece of tape so that way it doesn't go anywhere. And then I'm going to start inking up the stamp. I'm using Simon Says Stamp Pawsitively Saturated ink in the yellow trio. The first color I stamped with was Lemonade, and then I'm going to ink up the stamp with Sunbeam. But if you notice, I'm only going to ink up the bottom 2/3 of the stamp, leaving the top third completely free of any ink, and that's because I want the lighter color underneath to show through. I did feather that darker yellow out just to kind of soften the edges. I'll do the same thing with the third darkest color of that trio of ink. And so basically what we've done is created an ombre of stamping across this card panel, which is really pretty. Now you could leave it just like this, or I'm going to take a little bit more ink and just carefully apply a small amount, very light, down along the bottom 2/3 of the panel. This just adds a little bit more softness to this panel, and because this is going to be a background, that's what I was going for. So after my ink blending, I'm going to move on to adding a few splatters. This is some Brutus Monroe Shimmer Mist. It's a nice, really pretty shimmery color, and it won't be super noticeable in the background unless the background catches the light, and that's where it makes it look magical. On the back side of that daffodil panel, I'm applying some red line tape, and I'm covering all four edges of this panel, so that way I have a nice border of tape that I can fold over some plastic that's going to make up my edge-to-edge shaker pocket. So I've cut a piece of stamp packaging, that's the plastic, and you can see it underneath of this panel. I cut it to be slightly larger than this background, and I'm going to start folding the edges of that plastic around the background panel and into the adhesive. So we're forming a pocket, and that's going to allow us to fill this with our shaker elements, and it'll keep everything nice and contained inside of this pocket. If there are any excess plastic pieces hanging off the edges there, I just trim them up, and now I'm going to start filling this shaker. I have some green sequins here from Simon Says Stamp that I'll go ahead and fill inside of the shaker. And then to add a bit more interest to the mix, I pulled in some clear sequins. And these will just add some nice difference in color in this shaker panel. After I've filled the shaker, on the back side I'll remove the release paper on the final edge of that background, and that's going to allow me to fold the final edge of the plastic into that adhesive, and it's trapping all of those sequins in place. I'll glue this panel onto an A2 white card base. And then once we have everything attached, I'm going to shake it up really well to get those sequins moving. Now here is the Spring Stems stamp set that I mentioned earlier. This has a variety of different daffodils and also crocuses that I illustrated. And I have the daffodil image here that I'm going to stamp onto white cardstock and then use Copic markers to color it in. Because I'm going to use Copic markers, I did use Simon Says Stamp Intense Black ink to do the stamping because that is a Copic safe ink. Now let's move on to the coloring. So I didn't do anything super fancy with the coloring on this. I kept it very simple and just added a bit of shading on each petal. So I used a variety of yellows, and I started with the lightest one first, brought in the darker colors and faded those out towards the lightest and let that lightest color feather out the edges. If you're interested in the exact Copic colors that I used for this project, be sure to check out my blog if you're not already there, and you'll find a complete list of all the colors that I used for each flower listed there. On one of the flowers, I actually colored it a white, so I basically just used a couple of very light gray markers to add some shading, and that'll give this flower some dimension but still keep its white color. Then I brought in some greens to color in the leaves and stems of the flowers. I actually used two different types of greens. I used a YG 41 and 45, and then I also brought in YG 11, 13, and 17. There's a random G marker there, and I'm not sure why. Okay, so once I finished up the coloring of the daffodils, we're ready to cut them out. There are coordinating dies, which I'm going to use here to cut this image out. Once I did, I decided I wanted to cut out the middle section of the flowers so that way you could see the background showing through that area. So I'm using a craft knife and I'm very carefully cutting through the middle sections of the flowers and just getting those cut out so that way I'll have some nice openings there that will see through to the background. After I finished cutting out the daffodils, I'm moving on to adding some foam tape to the backside. So my plan is to pop these daffodils up off of my shaker panel. This will give them a little bit more lift off of that background, and it will also add some nice dimension to the card too. Now, of course, we can't make a card without a sentiment, or at least in my opinion, I like to add a sentiment on all my cards, so I can't make a card without a sentiment. So I'm pulling out one of the sentiments from the Spring Stems stamp set. It's called Many Blessings. I embossed it with white embossing powder, and I'm going to then use my fine tip scissors to fussy cut that greeting out. And then I'll glue it right on top of my card using a bit of foam tape. I'm just going to put it at a little bit of an angle. I've enjoyed doing that lately. I really like the interest that it provides on the greeting. So after I attach that down, guess what? That's the completed card. So simple, super easy to do, and look at how much detail and beautiful color this has. It is truly a reflection of spring with all those bright yellows and greens. I look out my window and I'm waiting for my daffodils to pop open. They're there, but they haven't bloomed yet, so I'm like really excited. And so that's why I wanted to share this card with you today, because I'm looking forward to spring and seeing all the flowers and everything bloom. I hope you are too, and I hope you were inspired by this project. If you're interested in any of the supplies that I used today, I do have them linked below in the video description for you to check out. Also, you can head on over to my blog for still pictures of this card. And I thank you so much for stopping by and watching this video. I will be back soon with more to share with you all, but until I see you again, I hope everyone has a very wonderful day. Bye!